If there's a through line that's been going on with Toy Connections in 2025, it's that I have been shilling for a lot of book Kickstarters this year. Now, I've been called a shill before, but people have said it out of context. People say you shill for toys. All I really collect is vintage these days. Anyway, can't really shill for that, but I can shill for my friends' projects, whether it's the gentleman we're having here with Total Toy Books or Carson's 3D Joe's projects, or recently Pixel Dan's TMNT project. So, I know a few people have said, "Hey, what are you doing, Ken? You're back on that Sunday morning time slot that you haven't been on in 2 years. What's going on? Are you bringing the live streams back?" Well, I am if there's a special occasion. So, in the video description link, you will see the Volume 3 Total Action Force Kickstarter, which will go over a lot of, well, I'm going to let the boys come in and talk about it themselves. They've been on this channel before, and I meant to click Brian and I clicked Paddy, but that's okay, because I was trying to go left to right, and that's how they were, and I went right to left because you guys drive on the other side of the road where you are. So we've got the author of this book and many other publications, Paddy Lennon. How you doing?
Hey, Ken.
Yeah, no relation to John Lennon. I know you've had to fight that your whole life. So
There's I could go into it, but there's two branches of the family, and he's the other branch.
Wait, what?
There's
Wait a minute. That's not where I was gonna go with this. All right, cool. It's like when someone has the last name Smith and you try to relate them to some. Anyway, that sounds like another topic. Okay.
Yes.
We'll be in touch. All right then. And the other member of this book project who runs Total Toy Books from a design, publishing, and ownership basis. Welcome back, Brian Hickey.
Hey, Ken. Hey, Paddy. Great to be on here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how many times has it been this year? It's been a few times now. It's been the Star Wars book. We've done a few pre-productions there, Brian, and Paddy. I've called you in the middle of the night sometimes, or I guess middle of the morning for you.
Yeah. Not for live streaming, but just for chatting purposes.
Yes. Just felt like venting one night. And you're like, Ken, I thought you wanted to talk about toys. I don't know how to fix your car. So, all right then. Yeah. Hope you guys didn't mind. I stole your guys' little commercial there. Forgot to ask.
A great way to kick off the show with an Action Force commercial.
And I forgot that.
No AI in the animation of any of those Action Force, live action sequences. All in camera practical effects, as always.
Love it. Good disclaimer and everything. I forgot to ask y'all for the actual file for that, so I just screenshotted it this morning. I'm like, it'd be really cool to give people an extra minute or so to file in, and to kind of anyone who needs to duck out early, they know exactly where to find it. But I'm really excited for this book. So those of you in the audience, if you want to see more history videos, there's a lot of unproduced stuff here and a lot of packaging photos and a lot of backstory on Action Force.
I was going to say, if you slow down the video, there's actually a lot of unproduced stuff that never been seen before in that video, in little screenshots. So if you go through it like frame by frame, you'll see like marker drawings of the shadow track and a bunch of Q-Force vehicles and things like that have never been seen before, other than in that video. So yeah, go through it when you have a chance, Ken. Go through it, half speed or something, and see what you can spot.
You want your private messages to blow up, or you want to not have it ding at 3 a.m. in the morning your time?
I want people to back the book.
Okay.
So they can see them. They can see them on a page rather than flying by on the screen in a half second.
Awesome.
Those kind of drawings and team photos that you see in that trailer, they're only a taste of what's going to be in the book. So it's I'm describing it accurately, I think, as the most comprehensive collection of Action Force pre-production material that's never been brought together in print form or even available online in a single resource ever before. So we've got all of the Bob Breakin's personal drawings. We have access to the Neville Chadwick photographic archive. We've got Brian Turner's photographs of all the different team concepts, Polaroids of kind of mock-ups and kit bashes that they did. And And of course, there was a third-party design agency that Palitoy worked with called Raffle and Tape. And you might have heard us mention them in other interviews, and certainly Bob talks about them in his book. And Raffle and Tape got access to their full archive of kind of marker drawings and concept ideas. So
Mm.
all of that is going to be kind of feeding into the book. And then plus that's going to lead into all of the kind of carded and box samples of what actually got released. So you can see that whole, creative development from early concepts, all the different ideas they were looking at, and how they landed at Series 1, and how that evolved into Series 2, and the different ideas that they looked at. Who were the antagonists going to be before they settled on the Red Shadows, things like that. Like, all that's going to be mapped out in the book, and then you'll
Love it.
eventually see what we did get, including where Action Force ended up in 1985, when they dropped all their own original content and started to bring on board the Hasbro product en masse at that stage.
Awesome. Well, you know what? One thing that I do like is that, and this is a spoiler alert for an upcoming SAS history video that Brian and I just completed. And Paddy, you've seen the super extended preview of that. You do mention a figure that was unproduced. And interestingly enough, I think pictures of that had actually been circulated before, but we didn't know what it was. And you actually told us this is what this thing actually is, and what it evolved into, and how it kind of indirectly related to the SAS we got in Series 2. So I'm like, that's actually quite interesting.
So, and I'm happy to expand on that, Ken, if it's not going to like reveal the or spoil the video.
How about
it? So one of my favorite SAS figures that was released in '84 is the SAS Attack Trooper. And while most of the Action Force Series 2 figures reused the parts from Series 1, the SAS Attack Trooper actually has got different parts. And what I was able to see in the material that Bob shared with me was that they'd done two designs for the US Paratrooper for Action Force Series 1. And only one design got produced. And the second unused design is what basically makes up the body there for the SAS Attack Trooper. So you'll see the original prototype in Total Action Force Volume 3 when that comes out.
Yep. So yeah, it just happened to be like right there. I was organizing the collection, and I pulled out my figures for photography, and there it is, right behind the Commando. So the Commando took a bit of a tumble, and I had to nab him out. But yeah, okay. So let's see who's in the chat, and I've got a small slideshow that I've got prepped here. So we've got Spoonkiller in the chat. We got Thanos Copter, we've got Nolan, we got Payne's Toy Samples, we got Joe Fan 84. I think I've said hi to Nolan already. If I haven't, who else is here? I thought I saw a few others. Closer to the bottom here, we got the Canuck here, and yeah, thank you for joining this chat on this fantastic. Oh, we got Nora Manchild. There you go, Jeff.
Hey.
And a name we're all familiar with.
Hey, Ray.
Hi, Ray.
Do you boys live relatively close to Ray?
In American terms, we're practically neighbors, but in Irish terms, he's miles away.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, boys, I managed to clip together a small slideshow for y'all here, and I thought this was a good way to start because it shows the 3 volumes together with the 3rd volume at the front. And I know I can tell everybody till they're blue in the face to buy the first 2 volumes, but those are out of print due to licensing reasons. Correct me if I'm wrong. Can we talk about, if a person doesn't already have the first 2 books, can they get the 3rd book on its own, and what would it give them value-wise?
So absolutely. So Volume 3 is kind of a standalone story of Action Force, which goes from initial kind of concept stage right through to what ended up on the shelf in stores. So if it's the only Action Force book you ever own, you'll get a very good overview of the story. You'll get a good sense of all that kind of pre-production material, and you'll see everything kind of carded and boxed as it was released. It's pretty comprehensive. Whereas I think volumes 1 and 2, volume 2 is only the Hasbro era of Action Force, so from '87 onwards. So it's kind of an independent story. It's not really connected to the Palitoy story, other than that Hasbro inherited the Action Force brand from Palitoy. But it's its own kind of story. And then the very first volume, Total Action Force, the Battle Years, that kind of dives more. It gives again a very generic, overview of the history of Action Force. It looks at all of the toys, but presented in a loose format, not packaged. And it also has a history on the comics in there as well. So a very comprehensive history of the Action Force comics as they appeared in Battle comic. So there are differences between volumes 1 and 3 for sure. They both cover the Palitoy era, but volume 3 will give you that for the toys, that very, it's a standalone kind of all in history. But if you bought volume 1 and you're interested in the more kind of pre-production side of Action Force and maybe a little bit more detail on Action Force Series 1, which we only gave a kind of a light coverage of that in the first volume, that'll be much more expanded and beefed up in this volume 3.
And I think as well, for the Battle Years, we had maybe 6 or 8 pages of pre-production imagery, and this is close on 200 pages of pre-production imagery. So that'll probably give you the focus, the difference in focus. And we had some really nice pre-production stuff in the Battle Years, images of the SAS van, images of the various Red Shadows flying machines that were kind of pitched at the time. But that's only, like I said, 8 pages. Whereas this, we'll have all that stuff that's in those 8 pages, plus another 100 and something more in volume 3, just to give you an idea of how much more pre-production material Brian's been able to get.
And I need to give a shout out to Dave Tree there, just as you mentioned, the pre-production pieces that were in Action Force, Total Action Force Volume 1, because they came from Dave Tree's personal collection. Dave is a brilliant kind of researcher and archivist on a lot of kind of vintage toy lines, and particularly toy lines associated with Palitoy. And he's been a huge supporter of all of our projects. So Dave, at the time we were doing that book, he was able to dig out stuff from his personal collection. Some of them were just transparencies that he had scanned in and cleaned them up. So he did a super job on that. I know that was a great little addition to Volume 1. But since then, obviously we've built up a great relationship with Bob Breakin. We've been able to make contact with Sean Woodward and John Pape of Raffo and Pape, and then of course been working close, building up a relationship with Graham Chadwick, the son of Neville Chadwick, and then Getty Images subsequently as a result of that. So that's kind of led into access to kind of greater archives that we didn't have access to when we did Volume 1.
Absolutely. And one of the things that when I was listening to your guys' discussion with Jason Merle there from the Order of Battle podcast is that if anyone knows more of the marketing people at Palitoy back in the day, be nice to get a hold of them and maybe we'll get a Volume 4, right? Because my understanding is you guys' marketing contact for Palitoy was mostly Jeff Macy, I think his name was, and he was a Star Wars guy.
Yeah. Jeff was very big on the Star Wars brand, whereas the guy was Mike Taylor, was initially the brand manager on Action Force, but he moved on after Action Force Series 1, and then it was Andy Lowe took over for Action when it was moving into Series 2 and kind of modeling more what Hasbro were doing with G.I. Joe in America at that stage. But unfortunately, I believe Mike Taylor's passed away, and Andy Lowe, nobody knows where Andy is at this stage.
Yeah, it would be nice to get a little bit more of that piece of that puzzle. But I mean, we're getting a lot from Bob. I know the late Brian Turner gave him some stuff to give you guys. Like you got some stuff from John Holmes, Roger Morrison, right? So there's a lot there, right? But like you said, there's a piece of the story there we'd still like to have some answers to.
Yeah, I mean, something we got we took pictures of when we were in Roger's house was the tooling diagram for the Robo Skull.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the same time, we were taking pictures of the tooling diagram for the Cloud Car for Total Star Wars. Roger's like, "Oh yeah, I have these as well." He takes out the blueprints for the Robo Skull.
You got those from Roger. I don't know why. I just assumed you got those from Bob. Wow.
No, Roger had those in his attic in a tube of those sort of tooling drawings. And
Holy
so
cow.
yeah, we'll take pictures of those, sure.
Please do. Yes. As far as telling the story is concerned, the one thing I believe, well, actually, it's directly on your Kickstarter, is that you're going to go over the sort of progression from Action Man and what became that first series of Action Force and that sort of through line.
Yeah, it's. I mean, there's obviously a really direct connection with Action Man and Action Force, and and then indirectly a connection with GI Joe as well. But the Palitoys was when Bob Breakin was first given the brief that we're going to do a 3¾ inch action figure line. Bob started to sketch out kind of an original concept, and he looked to the designs that his colleague Greg Hughes was doing on Action Man for the Special Team series. And that figure that you see on the left there in the image you have up on screen, that's the Special Team Ground Assault uniform, which is kind of like a near future military look. And Bob was kind of tapping into that initially when he did his initial sketches. And then Mike Taylor made, who as brand manager made the decision, it's going to be just commercially a safer bet if we just copy the top 12 Action Man uniforms and just scale those down. So then Bob did a second set of designs based on them. And we've shown those drawings in Bob's book, My Palitoy Story. They're included in there. And they will be making an appearance again in this book. But it would be nice to show that the Action Man characters themselves with the Action Force counterparts beside them, just to get a sense of how that kind of evolution goes.
Brian, did we ever figure out which SAS uniform got downscaled to become the 82 figure?
I would say it's probably the original uniform. That when we were having a conversation about that, I'd say it's the original uniform that came out, the one that they got in from the factory that smelled of strawberry shortcake.
Yes.
I'd say it's that one.
Okay, I was just thinking because a lot of us just assumed it was the key figure because it's so similar to that 1980, that Christmas 1980 outfit that didn't make it out on time. So okay, just good thing to consider. But yeah, and as for the pre-production you all mentioned, I mean, some samples are literally right here. In fact, there's that U.S. paratrooper. Yeah.
So that the figure on the right is a unused U.S. paratrooper design for Action Force Series 1 that would go on to become the SAS attack trooper.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what are we looking at on the far left here? Any idea?
The far left, that is a German officer. So to go with the German stormtrooper, they obviously developed the German officer figures.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So it was never, the German stormtrooper went into production, but the officer figure was never went beyond this kind of stage. And then, of course, there is a recolored version of this German officer in red shadow garb, with some extra tooling to the face. So this is the base that would have been used to create the red shadow officer that, again, also never got produced. But that Matt Paul, our good friend Matt Paul, made an amazing custom of.
Which Ken seems to have there in the background somewhere. I'm sure he's looking now. Did we sell you that, Ken? That one at Joe Fest?
It's there. It's there, but it's somewhere underneath the Robo Skull and behind. Oh, there we go. All right, we've got it. Right, I'm going to maximize your screen for a second there. At least you've got it close by. There it is. That's the Matt Paul Kraken Creations version.
Fantastic figure.
Yes, and the arms and legs are actually magnetized, right? So
it's all they're all magnetized, so they do pop off, pretty easily. Let's see. It should. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. There's the arm.
And that's how he dealt with the 5 POA style.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just good to see this because these look like they would have fit right in with the 82 line had they kept going in that style.
Yeah.
Right. But eventually they decided to go more fantastical sci-fi. My understanding is that, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but Bob presented this space vehicle at the same time that the Triad Fighter, the Sea Lion of Brian Turner's, and the Robo Skull were presented, right? And they selected those three and left this one on the cutting room floor.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yes. So this made it to a prototype mock-up, which is the images we have here. And for the longest time, there was only one image of this vehicle out there, which cut off the last quarter of the vehicle, and we have that image in the battle years. But while we were looking through Bob's stash of cine films and such, we found this Kodak film strip, which is shows the full vehicle for the first time. So this is these are the only images we have of the full vehicle. So nobody knew what the engines looked like for like 30 years.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing. Right. Yeah. I wonder if it would have been hard to market this and the Triad Fighter on the market at the same time, because
I think probably two new vehicles for the same sub team probably would have been a big ask for that year. I mean, you think about it, they only did one enemy vehicle, and then they did the Q Force vehicle and then a Space Force vehicle. So I think, and Bob has said that had the Palitoy design team continued on into 1985 with Palitoy, that they probably would have pushed to get this released. Had the designers stayed around for 1985, because this obviously, I mean, it's a solid looking design. I mean, it looks cool. I think I saw somebody in the chat there say it's like an amazing 1970s spaceship design, and I think it is. Yeah. So I mean, I would love to get one of these as a kid. I'm space mad, so I would have loved to have seen the ship get out at the time.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of, you can even tell from here, there's a lot of playability in there. You can fit probably 4 figures in there, 4 or 5 figures. There's weapons on the front and the sides, and obviously the extendable legs as well. Like, there's a lot of play features in this, and I think this would have been a really great vehicle.
So included in the book with this will be Bob's original sketch for this design. Is going to be included. With another smaller vehicle that it could kind of grip and carry. Again, it's just a sketch, it's a pencil sketch, but you can see where Bob's kind of mind was at, and this could have been so much more. What we're seeing in this photograph here is only the tip of the iceberg of what maybe Bob envisaged this could be. And then Paddy will be familiar with the Brian Turner sketch that takes that kind of central part of the body. And Brian Turner did some very developed sketches of how that could be adapted into these other kind of modular kind of weapon systems that could be developed too. So there was a lot of design thinking went in around this kind of spaceship, and it's this kind of modular playability element to it.
Well, speaking of Brian Turner, a big part of his legacy is that there on the left, the Sea Lion prototype, right?
For sure. Yeah. And that's only like a rough, really quick kind of kit bash, and where you see where the final design kind of ended up. It's brilliant where you can see how the designers were thinking that the initial kit bashes really only, they didn't really capture the full vision for the vehicle, but we have all of the kind of the little prototype mock-ups that take us from that early mock-up right through to the finished Sea Lion, and it's great to be able to see that.
Yeah. Brian Turner had an interesting career, because it seems like he started as a display manager, right? And then all of a sudden had some input in design, right?
He basically just transitioned into the design department. So he was display manager for a long time, doing the toy fairs, but as display manager, he also worked directly with the retailers, setting up the displays like in Windows and, in store. But to get into he just wanted to transfer into the toy design department. It's something that he had a real passion for, and clearly great skill for. And even when he transitioned over to being a toy designer, he still was doing like display work. So as Paddy will know from the Star Wars book, he was commissioning Nick Farmer, an ex-Palitoy team member, to build the displays that he was no longer building himself, because he was working on toy design.
So just so I can clarify, Raffo and Pape took this design and kind of evolved it, but what was Raffo and Pape's actual role relative to the design department?
Well, they were a separate company. So they were like just freelance. Freelancer isn't the right term, because they were an agency, so they were a contractor is probably a better term. And when Palitoy needed the extra bit of kind of bandwidth within its resources, they would reach out to RAF One Pape and maybe other agencies as well to kind of help them with with the workload. So with Action Force, while the initial brief came in to Bob to start developing the concept, it was a lot for one designer to try and get up off the ground on his own. So he reached out to RAF One Pape to focus primarily on vehicles. But they worked on being the creative powerhouse that they were. They're RAF One Pape are brilliant toy designers, and they've worked on loads of multi-million euro selling brands. They just went full on at it and just put loads of ideas together.
So you say they were a design contractor to kind of like augment Palitoy, because Palitoy's internal staff had a lot going on. So
yeah, and a lot of it is kind of concept designs. So they would come, the Palitoy would probably instruct them to say, look, we want to do some new SAS vehicles. What can you think of that we might be able to produce? And RAF One Pape would come back with a set of concept sketches for, here's a few vehicles we think you might do. So the perfect example would be the SAS surveillance van, which we showed pictures of in the battle years. So they would have initially done the concept for that. There's an initial concept sketch we have of the Z-Force Jeep that has additional features that didn't make it into the toy. So they would kind of go big and say, this is what you could do, multiple weapons and multiple, features and things like that. And then what you find is even the stuff that got released, Palitoy had to cut out some of those features for the budget. So like I said, the Z-Force Jeep, RAF One Pape's sketch for that has a missile launcher, a missile rack, as well as the guns. And that was obviously costed out at some point.
Wow.
But the initial concept is there. And I think, as we mentioned in the intro video there that you showed earlier on, you can see one of their sketches for the shadow track in there as well.
Well, that's why I'm glad to have you gents on here, because you kind of picked the brains of the right resources here. Yeah. Any idea what the figures on the right would have been made from? Because that doesn't look like tooled.
I would say they're probably resin, right?
I would guess. Well, I'd have to check with Bob Breakin, and in fact, I will be chatting with Bob next week, and I'll ask him exactly what they would have been sculpted out of. But I would guess wax was something that they would have used, for early kind of stuff, early kind of detailed designs. Wax would have been one of the materials they worked with. So it could be wax, but only Bob would be able to answer that directly. So
yeah. So we have seen images of those Space Force figures as well, painted up, and again that image is in the battle years, and so I would expect the painted ones are probably resin. These may be wax for the sculpting, just as sculpting inputs. Yeah,
I got you. Yeah, cool.
Oh yeah,
and so this was part of the Kickstarter page there, and I know we've seen Baron Ironblood in this kind of like Darth Vader cape before. Is there any reason why you chose to preview this image specifically as on the Kickstarter page?
It just thought it was a great image. You get to see kind of an early mock-up of the laser exterminator. You've clearly got like a pre-production version of Muton, not fully developed. And then Baron Ironblood. I mean, there's a black cape and a red cape version of this kind of early green-skinned Baron Ironblood figure, which we believe the skin is glow in the dark skin. That was the idea behind it. And the Red Shadows Force, in its initial kind of concept, it was a much smaller force than what it launched. But like, there's no Black Major here. There's no Shadow Track. It's a pretty small kind of team. Which it would grow a lot before it would hit shelves in '83.
And I think this is interesting as well, because it's all stuff Palitoy would have had access to quickly mock up. So obviously the laser exterminator, they would have had samples of the HAL that they could paint up pretty quickly. And the same with the Cobra Commander for the red laser mock-up. Muton obviously is the deep sea diver, so that tooling was available to them. And copies of the deep sea diver figure would have been available to them to bash it up together quickly. And the same with the Red Shadow, where obviously it's existing tooling that they're putting together pretty quickly. So this is probably something they could put together in a day or two to show off as a proof of concept. Whereas other items for the Red Shadows, they may not have had access to those items yet. So they're not going to have an escape armor to hand maybe Sorry, I can't even remember the name of the GI Joe version of the escape armor.
Oh, the snake. The snake.
armor.
Snake armor. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is probably stuff they had quick access to that they could put together fairly rapidly to show kind of a proof of concept.
Yeah. The one thing that I found really interesting was that, as we've come to know over the years, the enemy team was just called the enemy team in the toy line from a marketing and packaging standpoint, and we sort of just adopted the Red Shadows name. But when I started reading the treasury editions for Battle Action Force, you see the name Red Shadows actually used to describe the overall enemy faction. So it does seem like IPC picked up on something that Palitoy did not, because you'd see the words like Red Shadow terrorist network is doing something, and you would see it in the caption of like one of the comic strips or something like that, you know. So I found that quite interesting.
Well, I think that's when you get the imagination of storytellers, which is what the team were at IPC magazines. They created stories. They would approach it with a very different mindset, say like a marketing company who are trying to sell toys. So Jerry Finley Day and James Tomlinson, they would have, and Scott Goodall, three brilliant, writers and storytellers. It seemed more logical to give the organization a name and call it the Red Shadows.
I think there's actually an interesting parallel there as well, because Hasbro, when they're developing GI Joe, just generically called the bad guys the enemy, and it was Marvel Comics who came up with the name of Cobra Command.
Cobra, yes, you're right.
Yeah. So the storytellers in the comics are the ones who are like, well, these bad guys need to have a name. They can't just be generic, the enemy.
Yes.
So that's kind of that's an interesting bit of kind of pollination there, isn't it? That it was the comics writers who decided that the enemy team needed to be named.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Paddy, that's another great parallel with the 3 3/4-inch GI Joe and Action Force, where both enemy factions were just called the enemy, and then it was the comics that kind of gave them proper names that we can relate to. The difference being that Hasbro adopted Cobra as the official name for the enemy faction, and Palitoy just kept running with the enemy.
Yeah, no, that's pretty. I never thought about that parallel actually until Paddy just pointed that out. Right, that's why we pay him the big bucks, right?
For sure.
Yes, $0.
And of course, this is the special weapons force that a lot of hardcore Palitoy Action Force fans just love seeing. And I want to thank you boys again for kind of debuting the look of Boffin and Bombardier there on my channel here a number of months ago. But we've never seen that particular image before. So
yeah, that's one of the images that came out of the Bob Breakin / Brian Turner kind of archive, and it really is fantastic. And of course, we know that when Palitoy's design department, closed down, a lot of the designers took stuff with them. Like they were basically told, clear the office out, take stuff away. But there was a lot of material that ended up, when Palitoy was closed down completely, being donated to the V&A Museum. And from what I understand, I've never had the opportunity to visit the archives in the V&A Museum, but a couple of people that I've spoken to who have been there have said that it's like the end of Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. This massive warehouse with these sealed crates, and it's all Palitoy stuff. So there could be more Action Force material buried in there. There's just so much material to wade through that you couldn't take it all in a single day.
The two of you are going to have to schedule a visit if you can.
Yeah, and we know like the V&A has, of course, that Q4 submarine that, again, the video shows some concept sketches of. There's a finished prototype of that in the V&A Museum.
Now, wouldn't Dave Tree have gone in and like left no stone unturned, or was he? Do you know he was limited on time, or?
So the V&A, for researchers who want to go into the V&A, and I have tried to do this, the V&A is only open to researchers for a half day a week. And it's in London. So if you want to go in, you have to book in advance and get their kind of approval to go in. Because I seriously considered it for the battle years to literally go in there and like just go to London for a week and spend a week there. in the archive.
Yeah.
And I approached them about it. They were like, "Yeah, we actually only open the archives for a half day a week."
Oh.
So it's like a Wednesday morning sort of thing. So you're like, no matter how long your day, so 3 hours is not enough time. And if you don't live in London, going over there for a morning is just not feasible. And I imagine that's something similar to what Dave experienced. So that's why I haven't got to the archives, because what's the point in going over to London? What's the point in going over to London for 3 hours?
How close is it geographically to Rollout Rollcon?
We booked that half-day slot, and we go in with like 15 blokes, all of us with crowbars.
It's only individual researchers they allow in as well. So the idea of us bringing in a team is not possible either.
We can do little research or lanyards,
Yeah. So they're very restrictive as to access they allow and how many people they allow in. So it's just, you would probably need to be months in there, and 3 hours at a time.
Do you know how close it is geographically to where Rollout Rollcon is happening? Because you might just want to do it the same week.
It's not possible, because I've been. It's near Tower Hamlets in London, which is kind of very central.
I was gonna say you could go there on the
London.
Wednesday. You could go there on the Wednesday and then you roll out Rollcon on the weekend. But
yeah, but I've been by it because they were the children's section of it has been they've been redeveloping the V&A over the last 5 years. So actually, when I was in London last time, the children's section was actually closed down because they were renovating the building, and it didn't open for a number of months. They've reopened the main V&A museum actually quite recently. And that's a gorgeous building. You might see, if you look online, you might see videos about it, where they've tried to put as much of the kind of general art and design archive as available to the public as possible. There's something like 10 or 20,000 items in cases that you can go up and see. And if there's something that's not available that you want to look at, you can ask them to bring it out, and literally the case will move forward. You can see what's in the case. So yeah, it's their new setup for the main V&A museum is really impressive, but they haven't finished the children's one yet. I think that's still due to reopen.
But this wouldn't be in the children's section.
It's two separate museums. So the main V&A is a general art and design museum, and then there's the children's museum, which is a separate building altogether, like on a different part of the city.
So,
and it's the children's one that has the Action Force prototype stuff.
Okay. Can you just imagine what it would have been like for Dave Tree to go in there for 3 hours? He looks down, looks up, and they go, "Hey, your 3 hours is up. Damn it!"
I believe at the time, Dave was allowed a bit more time in there, because it was a special project he was asked to help out with.
I gotcha. Damn, I can just imagine what's in there if they just let you go in with a team and be like, "Oh, we want more time. We want like 7 hours or something like that."
Give us a week.
Just grab Ray Murphy, grab Stephen Kelly, get your whole Irish group there, bunk in a, whatever.
It's going to happen again. One of these days, it's going to happen.
Okay, so I think I've mistitled this stream. I've called it the story concludes, because I've assumed this is your last volume of Total Action Force. But now that I know this about the V&A, who knows what the
Total Action Force Volume 4, the V&A heist.
Yeah.
Fund us to plan an intricate heist of the V&A children's section, so we can go in there and rob them blind.
Put stuff in your pockets and never go back. No.
Exactly.
Okay. Never.
Pick up all those Special Weapons Force prototypes.
So I just showed this to show what the layout would, give people an idea of what the layout would look like. But people, link is in the description. Like they said, it can be a standalone volume by and large, especially if you didn't get the first volume. You'll really want this one now. So it closes on Wednesday morning my time, which is basically close to midnight or just after midnight Ireland time. No, hold on. I'm wrong. No, it's in the afternoon Ireland time because you guys are 8 hours ahead.
It's like 5 p.m.
Yeah.
Just about 4:45 in the evening Irish time on Wednesday. So I think we're down to the last, was it 70 hours, something like that. So it's but it's going to be a bit of a nail biter finish. But there's a lot of people showing a lot of love for this project. So
it always is with our Action Force books, as I was saying to Ken before we started. Like, they all seem to fun the last day.
Well, your more new Sisters Made one was actually further back, like percentage wise, on a completion basis on that last day,
Yeah.
and then it got
Mhm.
that big FOMO spike at the end. In fact, I think that was the one that I usually I back on the first day. I remember talking to David Gillis and being like, "This book's a little bit advanced for me," and I was like, "No, you know what? Screw it." I think it was either the second last day or the last day. I just said, "I want this," right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And Joe, I need to
And
give a shout out to Dave's book as well. That is a great book. I mean, it's a very different kind of take on the Action Force, on vintage Action Force. It's I mean, it's Dave's a brilliant customizer. So it's kind of like his reimagining of the Action Force universe, and you get this blend of kind of Palitoy products and then Dave's customs kind of brought together with them in these amazing diorama photos. It's a great little book, and if people missed out on that Kickstarter, you can still, we've got a small number of those books left. You can pre-order or you can buy your copy on totaltoybooks.com right now. And it's a great
awesome.
companion piece to go with the Total Action Force books and Total Robo Skull when that comes out in a few months' time.
Which I'm gonna touch on here shortly. So this kind of covers like the main slide presentation that I have for people to come back, and if they hopefully we've answered some questions here. Um, and like I said, the deadline is in the last 70-ish hours of the campaign. But you did send an update on the total Star Wars book because for a lot of people who don't know, there was a lot of Palitoy Star Wars stuff too, right? They were the marketing arm in Europe or parts of Europe at least. So you sent this. You were very excited when you sent this on the Kickstarter update, right?
Yeah, that was those proofs came in during the week, and I was so pleased with the quality of the color reproduction. It's one of those things, you want your stuff, you put a lot of work into the photography, into the design, and you want it to look good when it's printed on the page. So when you see the proofs coming back in from the printer, and this is going to be great, the color reproduction is there. Um, the, it's you're kind of in that kind of last stretch now. So we shared this image here, and we also have I think we also in the update we shared an image of a mailer, mailing card.
Yes.
So for anyone who got the slipcase edition, that goes in a special protective mailing
Yep.
carton before it's shipped out to backers later this year.
Yep.
So this is in a really good place now in terms of production. Due to get another update from the printer on their timeline so at some stage next week. But right now we're working towards having the books in our warehouse by November of this year, and we'll be able to begin fulfillment straight away once that inventory's been taken in by the warehouse. So it'll be straight in, straight out, and into backers' hands. So we're pretty confident right now that backers are going to have their books in time for Christmas.
So, question: does this one have the Hasbro Disney backing like you had for some of your other books, or is this
No,
independent?
the model we're using on this one is more of a fair use model. So we're looking at more like
Okay.
what the guys for Red 5 did,
Okay.
or
Fair enough. Yeah.
yeah. So it's that type of kind of model for this. So we're telling like a Palitoy story, rather than a licensed Lucasfilm story.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. The reason I ask is because on Jason Merle's Order of Battle podcast, I did notice that y'all said you had to kind of cut down what was in there. Like you had way more, so it's almost like, oh, could you? Is it worth squeezing a volume 2 out of this, or would you not be able to squeeze a volume 2 out of this?
I think
For
it's a
Star
pretty.
Wars, for Star Wars, I think we've got a very complete story in there. Now we did have to cut out some imagery that we couldn't
Yeah.
use.
Yes.
It was a case of the text is all in there, so the text hasn't been cut. And none of the topics we wanted to touch on have been cut entirely. It was just the quantity of images Brian had. I mean, I think you mentioned you took about one of the days we did a photo shoot. You did something like 800 pictures.
It was crazy.
Yes. It's like how do I whittle this down?
That was one of like 4 days of photo shoots you did. So if you can imagine the quantity of photos Brian took, probably well over a couple of thousand images, and then there was the stuff we got from people's archives, and then there was the stuff from the newspaper archives and things like that. So we probably had, I don't know, maybe 3,000 images for Star Wars book.
It was a lot of imagery for sure.
Yeah. So that, and when it gets to that, when you only have 250 pages to play with, suddenly you're like, you do have to kill some of your darlings because there's images you want to get in there that you just can't get in there because you physically don't have space. So that's where probably it comes from in the Star Wars end of things.
I mean, as Paddy said, like it's a very complete story of Palitoy's involvement in that kind of early Star Wars merchandising period. But if you know, it wouldn't be if you were talking about a volume 2, there probably is scope to do volume 2, but it's not something that Total Toy Books would do. I think if you look at what Red 5 did for, say, for Kenner, where they were able to look at every single card back variation for each figure release.
Yes.
We don't go into that. We just show the original card back release. We don't look at all the variant card backs. Say if you take, Farm Boy Luke. We don't show all the different card back variations over the years for Palitoy, but there's scope there for somebody else to do that type of a project. So, and we're happy to leave that to the card back variant experts. But if you're interested in the Palitoy history, then this is going to be very complete and very visual. And you can see from the image on screen there, loads of visuals. And again, it's pulling on material from Bob Breakin and Brian Turner's archive as well. In fact, this book, I would say, wouldn't even have been possible for us to do without the input of Bob and Brian Turner.
And you have that Jeff Macy angle for this one as well, right?
Yeah,
So.
Jeff was brilliant. His interview is amazing. And Carol Day, the PR, amazing.
And I think we probably interviewed about maybe 14 people for this book. Who were directly involved, between Nick Farmer and Greg Hughes and Bob and Roger and John.
Carol, Greg Hughes was involved. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got an hour with him one morning.
Good.
To talk to him about. So his first job in Palitoy was to redesign the X-Wing for Star Wars.
Cool.
To take out the electronics. That was his first job, was asked to do those design sketches.
And I think
and he also worked on the display cases that we talk a little bit about in the book. When he left Palitoy, Nick Farmer hired him to work on display stuff for toy shops. And so he hand built a lot of those display cases as well, that they give out to various toy shops.
Now, remind me, is this the book where you all kind of talk about like the Palitoy history in terms of like the parent company, the trademark, and like how it switched parent companies over the years? Because here on the out west, we sort of just assume, or not out west, overseas, we sort of just assume that Palitoy was like Hasbro's equivalent for Joe, for example, but what we failed to realize is Hasbro was its own company. It was the parent. It did not have a BXL followed by a General Mills followed by a spin-off, sort of either owning it or absorbing it in. So is this the book where you said you kind of go over that a little bit?
Yeah. Paddy does a great introduction to a very, very concise history of Palitoy. I'll let Paddy talk about it there.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you guys are lucky in the States where Hasbro has basically stayed in the same family since its foundation.
Yeah, since 1923 or whatever.
The Hassenfelds have always owned stock until obviously Alan Hassenfeld died a few months ago. But the Hassenfelds have always had stock in it, so it's been a fairly consistently one family has owned Hasbro since its foundation. Whereas Palitoy changed hands multiple times, even before General Mills got involved. And it really, when General Mills got involved, Palitoy was one of a group of companies across Europe, where Palitoy was initially part of a larger group, and then they tried to keep the other companies quite separate. So there wasn't much contact between Palitoy and, say, the company in Germany or the company in France. Initially,
autonomous.
But yeah, they're almost autonomous, and they barely talk to each other. What they would do is they would sell each other their products. So Meccano would come to Palitoy and say, even though they were owned by the same company, General Mills, they would come and say, "Do you want to buy some Meccano?" And Palitoy would go, "Yeah, we can, but do you want to buy some Action Man?" And they would basically sell each other the products they developed in house. And then it wasn't until kind of the mid 80s that stuff got consolidated, and those companies then started swapping staff members. So Jeff Macy started out with Palitoy, working on, Action Man. But as his career progressed, he moved on to Star Wars. Then he was promoted and he was moved over to manage the German company. And he told a very funny story for our book, where when he was sent over to Germany to manage, Germany, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, he hid from his staff that he was fluent in German and French, because they would talk about him behind his back and say things, and he would just assume, he would just act like he was a stupid Englishman, but only English, unable to speak the language. But he knew exactly what was going on because he was fluent in French and German as well.
That's incredible.
But he never told any of his subordinates that.
Yeah. I know I was bugging you guys. I sent you guys both a message yesterday asking, like, hey, when did Palitoy actually close its doors? And then you both were like, that's a good question, Ken. We think people think it's one thing, but it's actually kind of another. And then it's not a simple kind of cut and dry sort of thing.
It's not a simple answer, as I said to you, because, most people would say 1984, because that's when Palitoy stopped doing their own design work. But
yeah,
kept on for 1985, which is when Action Force Series 3 came in, and it was just, the G.I. Joe product repackaged. But it actually kept going for a couple of years after that. Closing down a company takes time, and I'm speaking from experience here, whereas Brian will tell you that my previous job, I was working for a company that was closing down, and it took about 3 years for the bloody thing to finish up.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what happened with Palitoy. Even when they said we're closing it down, it took about 3 years for it to actually close down. So the design team were in 1984. The big layoff in the manufacturing side was 1985, which we cover in Total Star Wars. And that was when they let go about 300 staff. And that was basically all the production staff who were working on producing Action Force and the Star Wars product in the factory. And that was their big kind of mass layoff, was May of 1985. It was big enough that it made the national news in the UK as such a devastatingly large, and big deal. But John Holmes worked in Palitoy for a year and a half. And he said to us in his interview that he basically was the last one out. Because Palitoy, they stopped manufacturing Star Wars and Action Force in 1985, but they were still making Play-Doh for another year to 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think Play-Doh actually might have continued into the early 90s. It was Hasbro would have closed it eventually.
94 was with the Play-Doh factory. Yeah.
They moved it over to Ireland.
So they moved the Play-Doh factory and the machinery over to Ireland.
Because
was moved over.
I was trying to find the
quote. It kept going in kind of a small way for a number of years, even after the majority of the operations had shut down.
But by that point, Play-Doh was like, it wasn't Palitoy anymore. It was either the spin-off company, or it was Tonka, or it was Hasbro by that point.
It was moved over to Hasbro.
That's right.
Time, So they moved over to Ireland in kind of the late 80s, early 90s, and again, that date is not exactly exact either. I'm not a Play-Doh historian.
Because the one thing that I did notice, like I was trying to find the date in Bob's book, but he's very careful how he words it. And other places, like even on the Colville Heritage Society, I think it's worded like the name Palitoy sort of just disappears in 85 from the public eye, right? But that doesn't mean that behind the scenes something still didn't happen.
Well, see, it was all spun into Kenner Parker, so it may have stopped being called Palitoy. The locals might have called it, that's Palitoy, but it was probably officially called Kenner Parker.
Yes.
They changed the sign on the door or whatever, but the locals would probably say, that's the Palitoy factory.
Yes, so that's why that's why it's like the name disappearing is one thing, but like the sort of like folding of the company and closing of the company and like the public perception sort of
and remember after 1985 the numbers of people employed there were very, very small. Some admin people, some sales people, some distribution people. It wasn't the major employer that it had been a few years earlier, where there could be thousands of people in Palitoy in the early 80s. Certainly in the run to Christmas they would have had thousands of staff, between warehouse and production. And then by the time it finishes up in kind of 1980, after 1985, you're probably talking dozens rather than hundreds. And it just is less important after 1985.
I went OCD mode and actually went and changed that line out of Brian and I's collaboration in the SAS, because I go as far as to say Palitoy closed entirely in 1985. I'm like, no, 10 years from now, someone's going to find something and they're going to be, haha, Ken, you're a dumbass. So it's not easy to take one line, splice it back in, re-export a video, re-upload a video. But I'm like, oh, this is just important enough that I rephrase it as design closed in 84, the company shut down sometime after, just sometime thereafter. Just leave it like that, Ken. No one's expecting anyone to have the exact piece of paper that says, doors closed, last employee left this particular date in 1986 or 87 or whatever.
Probably actually the place you'd find that is the V&A Museum, because you could probably just go back in there and say, when's the last new document? What's the date of the last document that's on, Palitoy or Kenner Parker paper? That's probably the V&A Museum. That's probably the last official. That's probably the last official act.
Yeah, but it's like you want to know, but you almost don't want to, because that document might say like 2001 or something, and it's like, what's going on here? Anyway, I've self-plugged your guys' Robo Skull, Total Robo Skull hardcover here, because this is another one I'm really excited for.
Well, this is, obviously, what we're really passionate about talking about this book, all the official announcements are going to come from Skeletron. So we can't reveal too much about where this is at, only to say that this is going to be a brilliant book. And it's, I mentioned earlier, this will be a perfect companion piece to the Total Action Force books, because it does, and it's no secret that it does talk about the vintage Robo Skull, but maybe in detail that is not explored in our other book. So this is, but of course, the big focus is going to be the Robo Skull, Mark II, and the supporting kind of range of figures that kind of have come out with that as part of that Kickstarter. So this is, this one is, it's very, very far advanced in terms of our content, and really all we're waiting on now before it goes to print is just to get the last few pieces. Once they get developed, the 6-inch figures, once they're done, we'll be able to get those photographed and then incorporated into the book. So that's really all that's kind of outstanding there. And it'll be going to print then very, very quickly. But, I would say if you're interested in the Robo Skull, with the vintage and the modern Mark II, get over to skeletron.com, pre-order this book. It's going to be a fabulous, fabulous piece. And again, full of great imagery. So, images of the finished product, concept stuff is going to be in there too. It's a brilliant celebration of the Robo Skull.
Absolutely. And yeah, my vintage Robo Skull's here, but the new Mark II is upstairs, and it's just, I need a Robo Skull in each floor of the house for some reason. It's just now a yeah, there we go. Let me just solo layout that.
All right, way out of the way.
Yeah, you've got kind of the paradigm shift happening over there, right? And you've got the treasury editions up there too.
Oh yeah, look at that. A bit of cross-selling going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. So back these books, everybody. You see the Kickstarter link in the description below. If you're one of those catching the replay, because I get a lot of that throughout the day. Oh, you were live? YouTube didn't tell me. Well, yeah, because I don't go live regularly anymore, so they don't really tell people. They don't really send notifications out like they used to. But coming in about 5 days here, I will drop this history of the Palitoy Action Force SAS. If you're on the Patreon, and no, don't spend your $2 on me today. Spend your €48 on these boys today. But if you are already on the Patreon, you will have seen this, and I've got some early feedback from people saying, wow, what a video. Everyone's going to love this.
Yeah, so it really is one of the classic Action Force teams, and I know definitely a big fan favorite. We get it's a real pleasure, Ken, to kind of do a deep dive in on SAS Force. Yeah, I can't wait for this video to kind of get out there and share it with everybody.
Yep, and I guess we're going to make it into a series. We'll do the other 3 sub teams, right?
Oh yeah, and we make sure you're able to jump on when we're doing Z Force, Q Force, and Space Force.
For sure,
okay.
Yeah.
We'll definitely do something like that, right? Yeah. All right. Yeah, I did promise Paddy he'd be on at some point in time, because love getting his insights in addition to Brian's, right? Plus, like I said, Paddy's gotten weird calls from me in strange parts of the day, so well, at least once or twice. But yeah, all right. Let's slideshow pretty much concludes right there. I think people know, they get the idea, they know what to do now. They know that I'm very passionate about, you guys are obviously very passionate, you know, you're producing the book. But I want more stuff to read. Not that I don't already have stuff to read, but yeah, the more the merrier. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
You never have too much.
Are there any questions in the chat since you have us here?
I mean, there were a few up there, like the you know, there was a question about the clay. Oh God, scrolling back. There were a couple of questions, right? Yeah, any way to still make this stuff since Palitoy is defunct? I answered that when I was typing while one of you were talking. I basically just said, I mean, you know, Hasbro has been including like Quarrel in the line, for example, right?
I mean, you know, theoretically, there's nothing stopping. I mean, you know, we didn't think somebody would remake the Robo Skull 5 years ago, and yet here we are. I mean, there's nothing really stopping somebody taking those images of the Space Force transporter and making their own one. I know Matt Paul has discussed maybe doing that as a kind of a 3D printed thing, but there's nothing really stopping somebody doing something like that if they had enough, if there was enough imagery out there that they felt they could take a bash at it. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, plenty of people have redone various Action Force figures unofficially and officially. Nothing stopping them. Nothing stopping someone looking at, you know, that Baron Ironblood and going, well, why don't we just do a prototype version variant Baron Ironblood and call him something else? You know, the same as any other stuff. I'm amazed actually nobody's really gone and done Special Weapons Force yet in a big way. I know, was it one of the O-ring companies is talking about doing a Special Weapons Force Trooper, right? I can't remember which one.
Yes, Call Sign Longbow is going to do.
Call Sign Longbow, that's it.
Yeah, an O-ring homage to Fixer, right?
Yes.
And I mean, Darren Howlett, when he had Red Laser's Army, did do Bombardier, right? Because he had the redone Flash mold.
Yes, both versions actually. He did.
Yes.
He did the prototype and the unreleased. Yeah.
Yeah.
So people have done them.
If people are looking for something right now that, you know, is a great, that really honors the legacy of Action Force, go over to Skeletron.com, pick up a Robo Skull Mark II, grab a few Wolf Troopers while you're at it, and there's plenty of stock available. You can army build that stuff. You can get a huge army of Wolf Troopers, get a couple of Robo Skulls, you're set. But back our Kickstarter first. Then go to Skeletron.com.
Yes.
I think Skeletron is off at a racetrack right now, so they won't even hear about your comment until a little bit later on. So
that's fine. Ben's ears are everywhere. He'll hear about it eventually. But yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example. You buy yourself a Robo Skull.
Spoon Killer. No, actually wasn't. Steve was thinking about changing the Delta 17 name from the Dark Shadows to something else, and then we ran out of time and we had to print the cards, and Dark Shadows as the working title sort of stuck. But you'd be surprised how many times that happens. Having said that, that red Okami ninja robot fits right in with your Red Shadows. So we'll go from there. It's not a Delta 17 chat today. I'll promote and plug that some other time. But yeah, sorry, some of the early questions got cut off. I did answer them like kind of just typing into the chat because it was just one of those like yes or no kind of questions. But yeah, anything else you boys want to say before we say goodbye?
Just a big thank you to everybody who has kind of backed the campaign today. Thank you so much. It's brilliant to get your support. And we've got, as I say, 70 hours left. And we're into the final stretch. So if you haven't backed already, get straight over to Kickstarter. The link is in the video description here. But if you go to Kickstarter and just type in Total Action Force, you'll find the campaign straight away. And this is pretty much a print on demand. So back the camp. The only way to guarantee that you're going to get a copy of this book is to back the campaign now.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of people ask us about, you know, oh, I missed out in the first two. How do I get them? And we're like, well, sorry, they really are gone. They're not going to be redone. And it is, you know, one of those things where, you know, don't leave it until it's already sold out before you decide you want to buy
know.
it, because it happens. It's happened a lot since we launched this new campaign that people are
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I didn't bother getting Volume 2, and now I really need to get Volume 3." And we sold the last Volume 2s at Joe Fest last year.
Yep.
And it's just how it works out. You know, we tend to keep our print runs quite low, because you know we're kickstarting these things, and you know we get the funding we get. So we generally don't have a huge budget to, you know, reprint things or do extra copies. So, you know, we do, as Brian said, we do some for the store, but they're very limited. Like sometimes it's double-digit numbers or low single-digit, you know, triple-digit numbers, and those tend to sell out pretty quickly.
Yeah, so this is my buddy John. He's backed Volume 3, but what happened was he's like, how do I get another copy of Volume 1? Because he was a bit late to it. I'm like, let me talk to the boys about a Kindle edition, and then I forgot about the licensing one.
Yeah.
The licensing
Yes,
part.
so-
I was like, damn it.
Yeah, our licenses are usually very strict in what we can do. So
They were very, you know, they're very limited licenses. So it was great that we could do what we could do with volumes 1 and 2, and it's brilliant that those books are out there and that they are officially licensed, which is amazing. But that license doesn't extend into doing like, you know, digital editions or additional reprints. But you know, we feel we've told that story. It's a great story. We did a really good job telling that story, and you know, but the only way someone's going to get their hands now on a Volume 1 or Volume 2 is going to be on the secondary market.
Mm-hmm. So don't miss Volume 3 for that reason, because you know there's some overlap there, and it's a good kind of overlap. So
For sure.
yeah.
All right then. If nothing else, I guess we'll call it right there, and hopefully people catch the replay of this. I know it's Labor Day weekend, and you know some people said, "Oh shoot, I'm going to be doing stuff." Jason Merle was going to try to catch this, but it's Alexander's birthday, so got to take the.
Right, Alexander.
I'm sure Jason is sick of talking to us, to be honest.
That's not what he tells me, but you know maybe he told you this. He told you something
He
different.
had us for 2 hours the other night, so I'm sure he's happy.
Yeah, he's asked if I have time to go on sometime this week as well. So it's like we'll all be busy. So all right then. Yeah. Back to book, everyone. And any other questions, I'll try to answer them in the comment section when I get the chance. So we'll just awkwardly
Thanks,
say
everybody.
goodbye.
And thanks for your support so far.
Hey, no problem.
And thank you, Ken.
No problem. And yeah, I don't have a fancy outro like Chris at full force, so we're just gonna do the goodbye wave salute thing, and